Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Sudzha direction. During the previous night we got lots of very interesting updates and details about the situation on the ground, and now we see that the situation is getting normalized. We're not talking about the stabilization of the line of combat contact from the Ukrainian side. We're just saying that this morning we start receiving real details and updates that confirm or give us more or less reliable information about the situation along the line of combat contact, about the configuration of the front line, and many other things to understand what exactly the Russians are planning to do during the next day. So if you remember, Russians launched offensive operation yesterday, and during the previous 48 hours we've been receiving just updates about panic, about chaos, about complete misunderstanding of the situation on the ground. The Russians were capturing one settlement after another. The Ukrainians were counterattacking. Mainly those Ukrainians were counterattacking who didn't have real information about the situation on the ground, that the Russians launched their major offensive operation. Some Ukrainians were running away, and so that was exactly everything that we got during the previous day. But today, this morning, on the 3rd of March, on the 10th of March of 2025, with the first lights of the spring sun, we start receiving details, the exact details of what is happening right now. So first, let's talk about the northern direction. And this morning, the group of forces north made another official statement about the situation on the ground, about the clashes, about the results during the 9th of March. And according to them, the Russians during the previous day managed to establish complete control over the small farm by the name of Loknya. This is the territory we're talking about. The Russians managed to secure the territory of the settlement by the name of Malaya Loknya. As for this village, as for this town, we have two geolocations from this territory. The first one took place in the most central part. Here we can see the biggest construction in this area, and we can see a Russian soldier that was waving with the Russian flag. And later, probably several hours, maybe even minutes later, we got another video from the territory of the former women prison in the territory, on the territory of the settlement. Here we can see 6 Russian soldiers that were waving with the Russian flags. So this information published by the group of forces north regarding the settlement was also confirmed not just by this report but also by real video and real geolocation. Furthermore, according to the group of forces north, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Kositsa, and the Russians managed to secure a small village by the name of Pravda. So these are already 6 settlements that were captured by the Russians. Furthermore, according to information we have, the village of Cherkasskaya Porechnya was secured and captured by the Russians, but this information we got yesterday during the 9th of March, and we had lots of videos that confirm this. Now let's move further and let's discuss the eastern and the southeastern part, probably the most interesting area. According to information we have, and the Russians managed to secure the settlement of Martinovka. In this video we can see another Russian soldier that was waving with 2 flags in the most central part of the settlement. So this information, as you can see, both was confirmed by the report of the group of forces north and by real geolocation, by the real video. And another settlement was also captured and secured by the Russians. This is the settlement of Makhnovka. This territory was secured and taken by the Russians also during the previous 24 hours during the previous night, and the Ukrainians, according to information, abandoned their positions. So once again, let's summarize everything. The settlement of Loknya, the settlement of Malaya Loknya, Kositsa, Pravda, Martinovka and Makhnovka were taken during the previous night, and the settlement of Cherkasskaya Porechnya was taken yesterday during the day. So in total 7 villages during the previous 24 hours and 6 villages during the previous night. And once again, when the first lights of the morning of the 10th of March came, the Ukrainians who were abandoned by their commanders start realizing that the situation is critical. And this morning we start receiving lots of updates that those Ukrainians who managed to survive during the previous night began leaving their strongholds, their shelters, and began surrendering to the armored force of Russian Federation. As for the beginning of the 10th of March, the main number of updates updates are coming exactly from this triangle, the village of Zazulivka, Yuzhny, and Ivashkovsky. So as you can see, the first batch of prisoners of war we got from the territory of Ivashkovsky, and according to information we have, the Russians are about to finish the clearing of the settlement, and furthermore the Russians are planning to answer the forest that located to the west of the village. Furthermore, the units of the 155th Brigade of the Armed Forces of Russian Federation entered the settlement, the village of Zazulivka, and currently the clashes are taking place on the territory of this village. Furthermore, the sources reported that Ukrainians this morning, when they realized that the villages of Ivashkovsky and Zazulivka were about to fall, began retreat process towards the settlement of Kazachya Loknya. And according to information we have, most of them were destroyed during this retreat process. The Russians said that the defense of this small village collapsed basically automatically. So this is about the situation about the morning. Let's discuss changes on the ground. Once again, lots of reports we got from official channels, and based on the official channels of the Group of Forces North and the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, we have colored territories, several territories in Russian favor, but some changes on the ground were made based on the reports that were published by the neutral mappers, by pro-Ukrainian sources, and by pro-Russian sources. So as you can see, we still have very huge territories that are considered as a contested area because we haven't received anything from this territory. But we believe either the Russians would provide us additional geolocations from these territories, or the Russians probably will publish something, some geolocations and some videos maybe already from the territory of the settlement of Kazachya Loknya, and then we will color basically everything in Russian favor. As for the settlement of Kazachya Loknya, as you can see, we have lots of icons from this area, and most of the icons are located along the main lines, along the main supply and evacuation lines, which are under complete Russian FPV and artillery control. So basically, even those Ukrainians and these Ukrainians who are able to escape the encirclement, who are able to escape all these settlements and villages to the north and the east, even if they are able to answer the settlement of Kazachya Loknya, we see that the Russians destroy them without any problems and without any resistance from the Ukrainian side. Basically, nothing that can answer the settlement of Kazachya Loknya can successfully go through this territory and answer the northern part of Sudzha. This is indeed a real cauldron, probably the biggest cauldron since the beginning of the special military operation, and most likely the Ukrainians during the day will continue suffering losses, and at least these Ukrainians who decide not to surrender. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the northeastern part of the Sudzha agglomeration. According to information we have, according to several pro-Russian resources and according to several neutral resources, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation during the previous night, managed to answer the most northeastern and the eastern part of the settlement of Sudzha. It's not like a Sudzha, it's Sudzha agglomeration more precisely. So the Russians are about to finish their clearing operation in this area. Another important video we got from this part of the settlement by the name of Mirny. In this video we can see a very huge group of Ukrainian forces, more than 100 soldiers. As you can see, there are lots of black dots along these tree lines, and we see that these Ukrainians began moving in the direction of the central Sudzha. And according to information we have, these Ukrainians abandoned their positions in the settlement of Bondaryovka, Agronom, and the settlement of Mirny. So we see that Ukrainians are not planning to build their defense in this area. They're going to retreat, and as for now, the most important and the main task for the armed forces of Ukraine in this area, in this part of the Sudzha agglomeration, in the city, in the town of Kazachya Loknya, is to cross the rivers. When talking about these Ukrainians, the main task for them is to cross the river of Sudzha. As for the Ukrainians that are currently located in the area of Kazachya Loknya, the main purpose and their task to cross the river of Loknya, because until they're located on the Russian side of these two rivers, there are very high chances that they would be caught in cauldron or destroyed by the Russian FPV drones and artillery. Anyway, when talking about the southern part, we have another important updates. According to information we have, By the way, we haven't received almost anything during the previous 24 hours. During the previous 48 hours from these territories, nobody was talking anything about this, whether the Russians were attacking or not. But this morning, several pro-Russian resources and neutral resources reported that as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to take under complete control the settlement of Cherkasskaya Konopelka and the settlement of Makhnovka. So as for now, we don't have anything that can confirm this, but if this information is correct, this is obviously a very powerful advance from the armed force Russian Federation. But at the same time, we see that the Russians most likely will be stopped along the river of Sudzha. So now we see that the main purpose of the armed forces of Ukraine is not even to hold their positions. We understand that most likely the Ukrainians are going to retreat from this territory. As for now, the Ukrainians have just one purpose: to slow down the Russians at least for one day or something like this along the rivers of Loknya and along the river of Sudzha. So this is the river we are talking about. And probably the Ukrainians will be able to slow down the Russians at least for 1 or 2 days, but it's just an attempt to win some time before the Ukrainians are able to withdraw their positions completely and to evacuate those who managed to survive from this territory towards the village of Yunakivka, with the purpose to prepare or to try to hold some defense already on the territory of Ukraine, on the territory of Sumy region. As for the Sudzha itself, during the previous 24 hours, during the previous night, we started receiving first maps with fire anomalies. The entire settlement, as you can see, is covered with fire. The Russians are bombing and attacking the Ukrainian convoys, Ukrainian columns, the concentration of forces, those who try to concentrate themselves, to gather themselves with the purpose to evacuate from this hell. Furthermore, the Russians established complete FPV drone control, mainly in the most western part of the settlement. Currently, the Russians are trying to destroy as many as possible communication equipment, vehicles, different radio, let's say, equipment that Ukrainians use to communicate between the Ukrainian forces on the territory of Sudzha and the Ukrainian commanders and headquarters on the territory of the city of Sumy. During the previous days, the Ukrainians continued their attempts to slow down the Russians and to probably support their forces through the village of Gueva, but as for this supply road, everything that entered this territory was destroyed by the Russians as a result of FPV drone attack. So, trying to make some conclusions regarding the upcoming day, what is going to happen during the next 24 hours, most likely, first of all, the Russians will try to cut this northern pocket. Once again, the triangle of the villages of Ivashkovsky, Zazulivka and Yuzhny. So this territory most likely would be taken by the Russians, and probably by the end or during the 10th of March of 2025, the first Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group will try to enter the settlement of Kazachya Loknya, and the battle for this village will start. Furthermore, we believe that the Russians will continue their pressure on the eastern bank of the river of Sudzha. They will try to take under control this industrial zone, the settlement of Yuzhny, Bandarevka and Agronom. And most likely today we're going to receive a lot of icons from this territory. Furthermore, the Russians will continue their pressure from the southern part with the purpose to meet with the Russian forces that are currently attacking from the east and the northeast, somewhere in the area of 2 destroyed bridges, where, if you remember, the Russians managed to ambush and to destroy a very huge convoy of the armored forces of Ukraine. And of course, we expect that the Russians will begin or will resume their attempts to attack from the settlement of Kurilovka towards the N07 road from the east, and the Russians most likely will continue their offensive operation from Novinka towards the settlement of Basovka, with the purpose to cut the rest of Ukrainians in Sudzha in Kodrun and then to begin the negotiation process. Once again, this morning we have already lots of reports that a lot of Ukrainians surrendered, and another important detail that I would like to discuss with you is the report of the Group of Forces North. Today they summarized everything that took place during the 9th of March. And there was a very interesting number, by the way. And according to the official statement of the Group of Forces North, as a result of clashes during the 9th of March, the Ukrainians, during the previous day, lost just 320 soldiers. So despite the complete collapse of Ukrainian lines, despite complete defeat of the armed forces of Ukraine outside of the city of Sudzha, we see that the Russians, despite the fact that they were advancing very fast, haven't managed to destroy lots of Ukrainian soldiers. And most of Ukrainian units and brigades and battalions in in this area managed to organize themselves with the purpose to evacuate from this territory. Once again, just 320 soldiers Ukrainians lost during that day, and this is just a regular number of daily losses on this direction or from day to day. So there's nothing special. So if the Russians, let's say, report about 1,000 losses, then we could say that that was a real panic, real disaster that wasn't controlled by anybody. But basically, the Ukrainians lost the same number as they lost every single day since the beginning of the Sudzha offensive or counter-offensive operation. Now let's move further and let's continue with the Pokrovsk direction, where the Ukrainians continue their counter-offensive operation, and today we continue receiving updates from the territory of Shevchenka. During the previous 24 hours, the Russian sources published lots of videos how they were FPV droning and attacking the units and the soldiers of the armed forces of Ukraine on the territory of Shevchenka. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map, we have adjusted the northern part of the settlement under complete Ukraine control. We got additional video from the territory of the settlement of Udachne. I'll remind you that several days ago, the neutral mappers reported that as a result of counter-offensive operation, the Ukrainians managed to restore complete control over the settlement of Udachne. But today, by the morning of the 10th of March, we got the video that confirms completely different story. Yes, indeed, the Ukrainians most likely controlled this industrial zone, but in this video we can see how under the pressure of the Russian armed forces and stormtroopers, the Ukrainians began retreating from this industrial zone with the purpose to save their lives. So basically the Ukrainians abandoned their positions in this area, and most likely the Russians managed to restore control over this territory. So these are the small changes on this territory. As for the South Donetsk direction itself, during the previous 24 hours the Russians continued their regrouping, but the Ukrainian sources reported that despite the fact that the Russians published probably 3 or 4 videos of how they were raising the flags in different parts of the settlement of Constantinople, the pro-Ukrainian sources Deep State reported that those were just sabotage and reconnaissance group of the armed forces of Russian Federation who managed to infiltrate it through the Ukrainian defense, raise the flags, and then they ran from those positions. The Ukrainians are saying that they still control the settlement of Constantinople. So this is the situation in this direction. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.